Zoom script. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom, and planning commissioners and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Planning Commission may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right, should we do a roll call, please?
Sure, Commissioner Kelly. All right, I think I heard an aye there. Commissioner Fernandez.
Here.
And Commissioner Douch and Commissioner Burns are excused tonight. They have let us know they're unable to attend. Vice Chair Ottinger.
Here.
And Chair Fritz.
Here.
Excellent.
Linda
So
Kelly's here. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Linda. We do have a quorum, although I don't think we have any actual public hearings tonight. So.
All right, we have no minutes to approve, so now is the time for members of the public to make any comments they would like to make for items that are not on tonight's agenda. And unless Andy has something he'd like to say other than what he came to say.
Oh, just what I came to say. So no member of the public has anything they'd like to say?
And we have not received any emails for items not on the agenda that would be for the commission this round. We did for the last meeting, those were posted to that meeting's web page, but not for this meeting.
All right. Statement of conflicts of interest. And since we're not really deciding anything, I don't think anyone probably has a conflict of interest. So we will move on to our regular agenda items, and the first of which is the Sebastopol Little League presentation.
Thank you, Chair Fritz. And we do have Andy Russell, the current president of the Sebastopol Little League, here tonight to, thank you, Andy. Good to see you. Just to talk a little bit about the Little League and have a conversation with the commissioners. I believe he's already had some conversations with Commissioner Fernandez and possibly Commissioner Andre, although I'm not sure, both of which are on our Ayers Park subcommittee. So Everett, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say by way of introduction.
I just, Andy, thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming here to talk to us. And as I had mentioned, I'll do it publicly as well, that I think it'd be good for your Sebastopol Little League to be involved in Ayers Park decision, since you are so involved in that area. So I appreciate you reaching out to me and conversations that we've had, and looking forward to your presentation and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I should just go ahead, and it's not a very formal presentation, but I thought I would share just a little bit of the history, and just that we started, Sebastopol Little League started before I was born in 1957, and they've been playing baseball there a very long time. This year, we've seen a pretty big increase in the number of kids that are participating. We've been kind of holding steady at close to 300 kids a season, and this year it jumped up to 368. So a nice kind of, I guess, over 20% increase and kids who are actively participating in the program right now. We do, what else was I going to say? We maintain 3 of the city's fields, the 2 fields down by the community center, and also Poly Field and Ives Park. And this year, just for kind of a frame of reference, our field budget is $25,000. So not a small, it's a fairly substantial percentage of what we spend to get the kids out playing baseball every year. With that, and that's factoring in, I guess I would say, also a whole lot of volunteer hours. So that would be a much higher number if it was all performed by paid staff. Couple things that we've done recently toward the I almost said the tail end of the COVID pandemic, but as kids were getting out and they had been kind of locked out of school for a year, last spring we ran some free clinics for anyone who was interested in getting out and playing baseball. We had, I think, just shy of 200 kids participate in that, and got a lot of feedback from moms and dads that that was the first time that their son or daughter had seen classmates in a year. So it's kind of a special thing and a nice way to kind of get kids back together and out and moving again. And then we also, after last season's spring season, we ran some free summer clinics. So our whole program basically is getting kids out playing baseball. Anybody, we offer scholarships without, whatever they're able to pay. And if that number is 0, they're out playing baseball, not paying anything. So we support that as well. And that's kind of all I brought. I'm interested kind of in hearing what else you'd like to hear from me. Any ideas as far as, moving forward, planning parks and kind of where we go from here. So.
Sure. Carrie?
So Andy, I know that you're not, you're doing the Little League, but you're also responsible for renting their fields. And I know there are a number of people like the adult leagues and whatnot that rent for you. Can you give a brief overview of that?
Yeah, so adult softball rents our Poly Field, basically weeknights through the fall, I think mid-August until Halloween. They pay a flat rate of $9,000. It's been these last couple of seasons. And that helps cover the cost of the lights and the maintenance involved with that. The field's open for rental to anyone in the community, and we have a rental form that goes along with the little kind of contract that dictates that whoever's renting the field has to carry insurance, and they could rent the field for an hourly rate or a daily rate depending on what their interests are. And that's it. That is not a very highly utilized feature. So, and I think that's something that when Carrie and I and Ever were talking about promoting that fact a little bit more with signage, like if you would like to use this field, here's how you do it, kind of thing. So that there's a little bit more communication out in the community of what that could be. I did get an email, and I need to connect with a person in the community center last week, or regarding they're interested in having a circus on one of the fields in the fall, which is probably not the appropriate use of that field, because I'm sure there's no elephants or anything, but I'm just picturing a lot of heavy use there. So, but I need to kind of connect with them and see what they're thinking about, what their ideas, what their plan would be for that space. So that's something I'm going to follow up on.
Great, thanks. Do any commissioners? I see you people have questions. Everett, go ahead.
Thank you. So Andy, you mentioned leasing or renting to other organizations. So what would work for organizations as far as the field use? Like you mentioned, a lot of traffic. I think you and I had a conversation of possibly be ideal for, say, if they have concerts and people can kind of put blankets out there and kind of lay out there. So do you kind of have an idea or a criteria as to what type of events would work with you guys on that and protect the field, not tear it up too much?
Yeah, so one of the things I think, as far as external structures or things like stages, tents, like big things like that, I think would, and heavy foot traffic might tend to really cause some damage to the field. Things that are super easy would be, family baseball or softball games, or if a company wanted to rent the field and hold a softball game for their workplace. I think the kind of what we talked about, if like during Peacetown, just for a place where families could kind of gather off away from the hustle bustle of the dancing and everything else, if they wanted a quieter place, to lay a blanket out and, enjoy the music, enjoy the evening there, seems like a kind of very light use. So I think those are pretty much through the summer, where we're kind of downtime, like we pick up again in the fall. So there might be some practice game overlaps there, but that kind of use, things that are lighter, and not tear the field up. So I guess would be our kind of main consideration.
Kathy?
Yes, you may already know that Wishman Hall also works with the community center staff, and they are very helpful in collecting the insurance and any deposits that you need. And then they, of course, would take a percentage of the fee. And if you were interested in what Wishman Hall does, I could connect with you at some point.
Yeah, I think I'm having a spotty internet right now. That broke up a lot for me. I couldn't quite make out the question.
Yeah, I was just saying that the community center can be very helpful in managing some of the rental business that needs to occur, because they are very good at doing that, and they have the resources and they do it all the time. So if you have one-on events, you could work out an arrangement with them that may work beneficially for you. So you don't need to manage it so much, but still take a cut for your maintenance fees for the field. Oh, I've lost him. There you go. Just wanted to show that information, because it can be very difficult when people who don't know what needs to happen on the field come in, and then they don't know where the garbage goes. They don't know about the locks or the lights or any of that. And those are services that the community center can handle that your volunteers don't need to do.
I'm sorry, Kathy, I missed almost all of what you said, and my internet was unstable. So I apologize.
Yeah, I'm at a remote location up in Washington.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not familiar with this system. It should be working okay, but there may be a glitch. Sorry.
Yeah, do you mind just saying that whole thing again? I apologize. I think
maybe I'll try if Kathy's connection isn't coming through.
Yeah.
So I think the summary is that the community center and Wishman Hall have the ability to manage rentals, because they are always renting out their spaces. Mm-hmm. And if the Little League wanted some assistance with that, so you guys don't have to manage people renting the field on a regular basis, they could maybe help help you with the kind of that activity. They would take a cut of the fee, but you can kind of work out with them, just to have them help process what's going on in terms of rentals of the various fields. And you would obviously have say over who's renting it and conditions or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think is that the gist of it, Kathy?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so if you're interested in having some help in terms of that side of so you can just focus on doing Little League things and have someone else deal with the rental, you maybe can touch base with Kathy and she can connect you to the people over there.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because we are, being all volunteer, it's after our day jobs that we're doing every other thing that we're doing. So that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, great.
It is.
Everett?
Yeah, Andy, we spoke also that the lease requires, or at least asked that Little League present some financial data to the city. That's kind of separate from, our responsibilities here. I think it would be nice to, on an annual basis, and you mentioned that maybe October, when you guys have kind of changeover and you're putting reports together, to maybe just integrate it in your Little League system, to on an annual basis come to the Planning Commission and just basically just report how many, how rentals, what kind of groups had it, just kind of a general informational would be helpful. Any issue that you're might be coming across, or any stuff like that, so that it doesn't get lost along the way, and it's just maybe somewhere in your customs or bylaws or wherever. It would be something that would be helpful for that.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect time to do it too, because we do an annual general membership meeting of our Little League volunteers. And basically the president for that previous year reports on kind of the state of the league, financials and the numbers of kids that we got out playing and whatnot. So that exact report we could come bring to you guys as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Do you have any issues or any questions or any anything that you might have for us, or challenges, anything of that sort?
No, our biggest kind of ongoing thing is we have people cutting fences. We have holes in the fences and people kind of coming in and running dogs, and they've actually been pretty decent about like cleaning up after themselves. So I wouldn't even characterize it as a major issue, but that's kind of as far as the facilities, our biggest ongoing thing. We had someone break into the bathroom and I don't know, stuff like that, little stuff like that. But seems to be a little bit more with the, kind of unfortunate homeless situation and stuff. But that's a much more complex issue than just Little League, of course. So when
Andy, that is something that I know our Public Works is dealing with in other areas of the park as well.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, what is the actual, usage for the Little League? You mentioned summer's kind of a downtime. So what are your kind of seasons, and how often does the Little League using the fields?
Yeah, so we're going full on right now. We're basically, our registrations start late in the year, November, December, and they extend into early in the year. February is the time where we're making teams up, doing our evaluations, and getting the kids out playing. So basically, from as far as field use, mid to late February through I guess June there's a lot of use into early June, and then a little bit lighter use with there's some all-star teams that practice and go to the tournament in July. Mm-hmm. And then so July is a down month. Middle of August, fall ball starts up, and the fall ball is hosted by one of the Santa Rosa leagues, but they use our fields. So kids from Santa Rosa get to come out and play, like under the lights at Poly, for example, and they use the two fields down at Laguna. So again, from mid-August through Halloween, and that lines up also when adult softball is there. So Poly Field is getting heavy use during that time. From Halloween basically through January, the fields are pretty well dormant. We don't do much out there.
Hmm. And can you explain maybe the differences between the three fields, like who uses the Poly Field and who uses the fields, each field over at the community center?
Yeah. In fact, and before I do that, we also rent school fields, because we have the younger kids, T-ballers and coach pitch. So we use, this spring, we're using Gravenstein, Sunridge Field, which is the Pinecrest, and Parkside. So renting 3 school fields. And those are for the younger, basically 5 through 8 to 9-year-olds. Clayhan Field is the next step up from that. That's the smaller field down by the community center. That's a 60-foot diamond. So that's used by our minor divisions, which are basically 9 through 11-year-olds. And then Poly Field is the majors field, basically, which is 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. After 12, they bump up to the bigger field down by the community center, Laguna Field. And that has intermediate, which is like a 70-foot base path we can set up, or a full-size 90-foot diamond. And at that point, the kids are basically playing full-on baseball, taking leads, stealing bases, all that stuff. And that field we also do share with high school. So the freshmen practice there and have a handful of games there, and the JV practices and has a couple of games there. So that field's shared with Annalee.
Everett?
Yeah, just want to ask a couple questions about sponsorship that you have on the field. And I noticed some of the signage, you can kind of see through the fence now, which is kind of nice and kind of adds to that. So talked about the possibility of using kind of see-through signs, I think they call it perforated, that you can see the advertisement if you're sitting in the field, but if you're on the outside, you can kind of look right through. I don't know really the cost factor, if that's even viable, but it's kind of nice to have that ability to look in the field. And also, as I had mentioned before, that, a lot of people go through that field, and even some of the people speaking at the council meeting, and there's nothing on there about Sebastopol or, where they can go to get information, to, find something to eat, or, what's going on there. Same thing as, with the Annalee Gym as an example. And maybe we can work something out where there might be a possibility to add something like that. So I think it kind of benefits everybody from that standpoint. But how many sponsorships do you have? Does that change over a period of time?
We shoot for having team sponsors, like one sponsor for every team, and they're going to get their name on the back of the jerseys. And often that's a parent of one of the kids that's on that team. There are also some other, businesses in the community that want to sponsor the majors, A's, for example, every year. So we have that sponsorship level. We do have, and we had, all the billboards across the fence at Poly. So billboard sponsors too. I'll have to look into the cost as far as the perforated. So I think we have a rate of around $300 for one field, or $500 for all 3 fields. And we've kind of transitioned from the plywood, like a 1/2-inch plywood board that we've used over the years, to banners that you hang on to the plywood board. So the boards now are more of a backing for that. But like when we were talking, Nick, a couple of weeks ago, I really like the look of Poly without all the billboards out there. So I think the connection to the park, and like I was mentioning to Everett when we talked, we'd go on family bike rides, me cruising through the park. And I always thought, well, man, I wish I could see that game that was happening there, but it's like blocked off by a billboard. So I think that's something we've talked about as a board ourselves, like Little League board, of that would be a good thing to give up, is the outfield fence billboards, just for the connection to the park and in that field. At Clayhan, it's not such a big issue because there's a bunch of brambles behind the fence, so you're not really blocking any views there. And same kind of thing. I mean, it's nicer probably at Laguna without a bunch of billboards out there too. But yeah, I even floated, and I think it's worth our discussion. What's the financial impact of the billboard sponsors versus, because it's actually a lot of work for us to maintain the billboards and keep that up, whether that's worth it, and also in terms of the visuals and just how nice the park is. Although there was a kid, we pulled an old banner off a McDonald's sign, and one of the kids a couple of weeks ago was like, "There's a new McDonald's sponsor," which is just like, they're gone. So anyway, so I think it's something that we're definitely open to discussing, and how that impacts the visuals throughout the parks. So I'll look into the perforated signs, but my sense is they might even be a little bit too obstructive in terms of visual.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, and there's areas like on the north side of the fence that you could put signage up there.
Yeah.
Maybe just strategically plan it, but yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a nice idea, because it is both when you're watching a game, it's nice to see into the park, and also when you're in the park to be able to see the other way, especially at Poly Field. It'd be nice to have that connection. It also just makes the park feel larger. I mean, it's a small park.
Yeah.
The field takes up a lot, so if you could at least see into it, it kind of would help kind of the overall feel of the park for sure.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful field. You guys keep, good maintenance of it. It'd be nice to other people to see that.
Yeah, for sure.
Chair Fritz, I don't know how to raise my hand because I'm also remote. I have a question when you have a chance.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. I came in about 3 minutes late when you were talking about renting the spaces for like family parties, and that a circus had asked you, but that seemed like not an appropriate usage for the space. So I missed the very first part of it. For clarification, do you lease the land and then do you sublet it to these other events, or how does that work?
We have a contract with the city, a lease agreement with the city, that we maintain the fields at our expense, and that the fields be available. Part of that contract is that we report, like Everett was mentioned a while back, that we report to the city of what our financials are and basically what we're doing. So and then another part of that is that the community, when we're not using the fields, should have access to the fields, and that's via the rental for uses that are appropriate. Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously you maintain it after the rentals. I get that, but does the city get any portion of that when you rent it, or does that all that go to the living?
No, it's not much. Like, so the adult softball league is really the main renter, and they for the 3 months between August and October, it was $9,000. That covers some of the cost of the lights. Well, it covers the cost of the lights and the maintenance there. But as far as other uses, I think it's like $25 an hour or something like that. So it's not an expensive rental by any means.
Or a big source of revenue for anybody.
Yes, not.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I had no idea, and have put on so many events in Sebastopol that was even a possibility. I'm just wondering, that's awfully inexpensive, but I don't know the cost of maintaining it. Would it be feasible at any point to really rent it out for events that didn't ruin your field and be able to bring in revenue, or is the maintenance just too cost effective and your usage too high to even consider that?
Yeah, I would think that uses that would have external structures, like thinking stages and tents and whatnot, a bunch of tables, like and heavier foot traffic that's not the right place for that. And I think any like potential revenue would get outweighed by having to fix the fields up. So, and that's the approach, as I've understood it, that I think the Little League has, I think we've said no to a couple, potential renters over the years for that reason. Like, I think there was a couple of years ago when someone wanted to host a wine tasting type event. And we just thought it would be too damaging to the field. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any questions or thoughts, Linda?
I think my questions have been answered by fellow commissioners already. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone have anything else? Is P a member of the public? Do we know? Should I open this up for public comment? Anyone? I mean, it's not a public hearing, but if we have members of the public
Yes,
who
you
want to say
should.
something, we can open
Thank
this
you,
up
Chair
for a
Fritz.
member of the
Yes.
public. So if there's a member of the public that has any comments or questions about the Little League use of city parks, now is your chance. And
I've not
seeing
seen
no
any
one,
questions.
not seeing any questions or comments. So yeah, if commissioners don't have any other final thoughts, thanks for your time, Andy. Appreciate you coming and giving us the rundown. And yeah, it'd be great if we could get a regular, maybe in the fall every year, just to sort of see what's been happening. We are the kind of Parks Commission, so it's nice to know how the parks are being used, and if there's anything we can do to help or collaborate on things, that would be good to know. So it's good to kind of keep the connection going.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate you guys' time, and thanks for letting me come, talk with you a little bit.
Great. Andy, appreciate it.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
All right,
Good
take
night.
care.
All right, our next item is the Parks budget review. So Carrie, would you like to let us know what this is about and what we can do for you?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Fritz. So yes, please keep your Parks Commission hats on. This is that time of year where I'm putting together the park planning and some of the capital improvement budget with our engineering department and public works department. This is what you're seeing tonight is a draft, which I think is just being submitted to the budget subcommittee. So the steps for the city's budget for parks is usually I review it with this commission as our Parks Commission, get any feedback, and I can certainly bring that forward as it goes through a budget subcommittee, which is 2 members of council, Councilmember Rich and Councilmember Hinton. There's a slight change this year in that those meetings are now public. So if you wanted to watch those, you can. The next 2 committee hearings for that are scheduled April 4th and 7th. I think they'll be starting off with department budgets and then moving on to the CIP following that. I would anticipate the CIP would probably either be the 7th or an additional date to follow. After it goes through the budget subcommittee, it does go to full council usually in May. The entire CIP, so parks, but also sewers, roads, and all the other capital improvements will come back to the Planning Commission. I think we have you scheduled either late May or early June for the Planning Commission to make findings to review it and make sure that the projects that are being proposed are consistent with our general plan. And we did that last year for the first time, if you recall. So it'll be a similar process this year, although we're spreading the schedule out a little bit more, so it should be less of a crunch turnaround for the commission. So what I'm here tonight to talk about is our parks budget. I'll start with an overview of the sources for park funding for those who are new on the commission. And then I'm just going to go through pretty quickly the pages and what we're proposing this year for park spending, and then ask for input, questions, etc. from the commission. So for our parks budget, we have three main sources for funding. We do have a park improvement fund that is a restricted fund. Generally, it's made up of development impact fees for parks. As most of you recall, last year this time we had the comprehensive development impact fee, and new fees were adopted by council in June, I believe, May or June. Those range about $20,000 to $40,000 a year in a typical year. There's just to new dwelling units, so ADUs larger than 750 square feet, single family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, as well as hotel rooms or motel rooms. So those fees went up significantly. So we'll, in the fee study that we adopted, so we'll have to assess how that might change the impact in the future. Additionally, if we have larger projects, like when the Barlow Townhomes was permitted, that was 18 units. So that was a little bit more than we would normally anticipate. The Elderberry Commons, the Project Home Key, Sebastopol Inn conversion, had already paid those fees because it was already a hotel. So we didn't get any fees from that as they converted it from short-term residential to long-term residential. The second component of funding in parks for all of Sonoma County now is the Measure M Park Sales Tax measure that was passed a few years ago. That's a 10-year measure, and it is a sales tax measure, so the proceeds of that can vary from year to year. When it was passed, the anticipated revenues for the city of Sebastopol was $85,000 per year. When COVID hit, we weren't sure what was going to happen, but it actually hasn't diminished very much. This year, in fact, they are projecting that it will be revenues of about $110,000, so more than anticipated. I believe I had $85,000 in last year's budget, so there's a little bit more money being collected this year than the outflows from that budget. Additionally, I think I have it right now in the budget projections as 85, just to be conservative. But the Measure M group does anticipate it being about 110,000 for next year as well. And then the third source is grants, and we have a couple of main grants going on right now. One is the Prop 68, which was the state park bond measure. We used about half of our funding for the Libby Park Super Playground replacement, and the other the remaining 77,000 and change is allocated for the Ives Park Pathway project on that one. And then the other larger grant that we have is from the Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. And that is the grant that we received for the Americorps trail extension that goes from the community center. We'll be repairing the portion of the Americorps trail that starts south of the community center parking lot, but then also expanding it where it doesn't exist all the way south behind the Morris Street buildings, between the Laguna and Morris Street, and down to Highway 12, and creating a pedestrian connection into Highway 12 sidewalk. So those are the three main funds. Just to highlight some of the accomplishments from last year, we did use Measure M funds for the Brookhaven tennis courts resurfacing. That is a joint school district and city tennis courts. They're actually owned by the school district. The city maintains them, and in exchange, they are open to the public. And those were resurfaced. We did use a portion of it for the Calder Creek hydrology study that's going underway right now as part of the Ives Park implementation of the master plan. And then, as noticed, we have a chunk allocated for the Ives Park Pathway project. So in terms of next year, and I will go ahead and just show my screen, these are the staff report, starting with the budget pages that are in your staff report. Every year we do allocate a small amount of money for the city parks trees from our Measure M funds. So last year it was about 4,000. This year we're also going to spend about 4,000 in terms of that budget. Let me see if I can do that. Additionally, we do, Public Works is working on removing and replacing street trees and other non-park trees. We don't use any of our park funds for that. We actually have, the planning department maintains a tree replacement fund. When people remove trees, they either have to replant 2 for every tree removed on their site, or they can pay an in lieu fee, and we use that money to plant trees elsewhere in the city. So it's a little misplaced, but it is trees, so it's in the parks budget technically. The Americorps Trail, as I mentioned, and you can kind of see the ball fields that we just discussed there, and then on down to Highway 12, just west of the Highway 12 bridge. Our engineering department is getting that ready for bid. We are anticipating, because the cost estimate was so long ago, that there will be some overages due to escalation in construction costs. And so I am recommending that we use a chunk of the Measure M funds to supplement our grant from Sonoma County, which is this Sonoma County line, is about 127,000. We have a partial match for that. It's a 1-to-1 match is what that grant requires, a 50% match. We're actually doing about 28,000 of that with the Laguna Foundation in-kind restoration work along the creek channel, and a portion of that has been done already. If you go into the area just behind the office buildings on the corner of Morris and Sebastopol Avenue, there's the vegetation is way down, the brambles and things have been taken out and it's been replanted with native trees and other plantings. And then the Park Improvement Fund, we had identified just over that $78,000 worth of grant funding from Prop 68 already in last year's budget, and we are recommending another 60,000 for the increase in construction costs for that. Burbank Farm is another project. This is a new restroom, ADA accessible restroom for that. In terms of the funding for that, the preliminary design work has been done. We actually just submitted a community development block grant, which for $146,000. I sit on that board at the Cities and Towns representing Sebastopol at the Sonoma County Community Development Commission, and they did recommend this project for funding. It needs to go through the Board of Supervisors for final approval, but it is very likely that we will be receiving $146,000 grant from Community Development grant for that, and then we would be using some of the Measure M Park money to supplement that. The next project you all know quite a bit about, the Ice Park pathway replacement. This body reviewed it. We did actually meet a couple weeks ago after the change of option and the selection of the preferred option by council to make sure that we weren't including things in the pathway that were not going to end up, that were going to be torn out as part of the development and implementation of option B. We don't want to do that. And so we met with Public Works Engineering and Jessica, and we have found a path forward. We're actually moving forward with RHAA, the landscape consultant, to complete some of those, adjust their design and their construction documents for that before we put that out to bid. So that is, that's the main reason for the capital cost for construction showing in the 22-23 budget. We are going to try to commission a portion of the work before the heavy summer season, and that would be kind of limited to the area in the southwest portion that leads from sort of the pool building to the ADA picnic tables. It's right along where the creek is channelized and those big redwood trees are. Those redwood trees are continuing to, as redwood trees do, grow, and their roots are really disabling that pathway and creating a public safety concern. And so our public works superintendent, Dante, does want to make sure if we can get that, at least remove that pathway, and we'll likely put in a decomposed granite or some other kind of a pathway in the interim until the sort of revisions to the master plan are done and that project moves forward. So there's a way in, but it's not a trip hazard or anything like that. And so we're going to try to be doing that prior to summer, and then the major paving portions will probably happen late summer, early fall after this heavy summer use is done. And of course, now we know a bit more about the Little League schedule too, so we'll factor that in. Ives Pool, there is a city council initiative to do an exterior shower outside of Ives Pool that would be within the pool enclosure area. That is, in the past, the Planning Commission hasn't been terribly excited about that and hasn't recommended funding for that. As you can see below, it is identified as either coming, I think this last year it was, if it moved forward out of general fund, it's now identified as a building and facility reserve fund funding, not the park funds. And I think that may be because, you know, I did represent the commission's request that, hey, you know, this isn't part of the master plan. It's fine if they want that, but we have other priorities for our park funds, and so that's why that funding source reflects that. What I'm calling the Ives Park Master Plan Implementation Phase 2. We'll probably have to think of a better name for it. And if anyone has suggestions, that'd be great. But this is basically you know, what are the next steps after we get done with the Calder Creek naturalization project that Jessica is working on in the hydrology. We've identified that there's probably a bit more conceptual work and refinement that needs to be done to get that ready to go after grants. For the capital money dollars to implement it. And so this is proposing to use, so this last year, the hydrology study and the work we're doing now is about 30,000. We're proposing another 62,000 next year to keep that project moving forward and get it ready for submitting for grants. This is another smaller project. And those of you who were on the commission, and I believe Vice Chair Ottinger actually was the person who recommended when the Davis townhome, the townhomes at the end of Moore Street were going in, there is a sidewalk connection that they'll have between the bicycle pedestrian trail on the west side of their property through to Tamagotchi Park and Park Village. Commissioner Ottinger, I believe, suggested that would be better as a city sidewalk. City Council agreed, and part of their tentative map requirements were that they have to offer that to the city as a public sidewalk when they come back for their final map, which they'll be doing in the next few months, I anticipate. And so this project is, okay, well, that's great. Let's connect it from, you know, the fence line through to Tamagotchi Park. And Joe Gaffney, who recently retired, our city engineer, actually worked with the developer who put in and continued the sidewalk onto City Park Village land, and it at least connects with the asphalt driveway right now. So we've actually got a nice chunk of that built already. The money identified here, $5,000, is a pretty small amount, but it's to basically do the design and construction documents to connect that through up to the north part of the site in Tamagotchi Park. We do anticipate it'll be a fairly small project, and I don't think this should even be a duplicate. I think it's more of a $50,000 construction fee at this point anticipated. There is a budget number in here for parklets. I'm not sure if that is appropriate for the park fund or if it would be some other funding. That's one of the projects that City Council recommended that that staff bring to the Planning Commission to talk about. That is represented here in this draft. And would take a chunk of park improvement funds to move that forward, or it would need to come from a different fund. Unclear on where that's going to be at this point. And that, I believe, is the final project. So I am happy to, I'll get my sort of screenshot up here of the summary, but I'm happy to go to any of these pages for any questions from the commission.
Great, thank you. All right, anyone have any questions? Kathy?
Yes, I had a couple of questions. I'll make a note on the parklet. I believe the street should be Bodega Avenue and not Burnett, the cross street.
The proposed, the parklet that is proposed for that is actually the one that's near Retrograde and Sunshine Cafe.
So that'll be
Oh,
south,
so
it's actually south.
That's south. Then that's
Yeah, so
south
it should,
Main.
I think it's actually, yeah,
Okay.
you're correct. It should be South
Okay,
Main,
no,
not
makes sense.
North Main. Yep.
I didn't have a map in front of me at the time, but yeah, now it makes sense.
I will make that note. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay. The phase 2 for parks, Fry's Park, I was wondering whether that phase included public input on a new master plan update, or is it just solely focused on the new path and the construction or what have you of the creek?
So that right now is focused on the creek and what it would take to get the creek ready for sort of the green stormwater grants or the coastal conservancy grants, those types of grants, which would really be focused on the creek.
Okay, and so if you don't mind, I've got a little interruption coming in so I can kiss my granddaughter.
Oh.
Hi there, this is Augusta Catherine Ottinger. Say hi to the people. She can't see you because you're so little. Heart. Night night, Grandma. Don't forget to sleep. Yeah. Thank you. So, so when would the public meetings come regarding the other areas, like whether or not there's a rose garden and how big the playground is and all of that?
Sure, that
When
you're
does that-
talking about the other elements that would need to move around or be revisioned as part of the
Yeah.
master plan. I don't have that in this year's budget. I was thinking that it would be the next year's budget.
Okay. Okay, and then I was thinking that having that information might be really good if we're going for grants, that some of that might be included, but I don't know how that works. Do you think it would be useful to go for grants for the other elements as well at the same time?
I think it depends upon the grant. I know in conversations I've had with Jessica and with GHD so far, they are more looking at the creek itself. Because it's healthy streams, daylighting streams grants, or the Coastal Conservancy is based on that. But I do think, there are certainly grants out there, and the Sonoma County Ag and Open Space, for instance, is a potential grant funder for something like this. They probably would want to see, there are some that would be more focused on other aspects, not just the creek. Or the creek and the associated pathways and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so if one were following the other, we could still go for separate grants for those
Right.
other elements.
Right.
Perhaps the work would work together to do it. I mean, it's hard to imagine the contractors working on the creek also working on playgrounds or picnic tables, but at some point, I guess it comes all together.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're going to be restructuring and regrading the creek, then obviously you're going to need to do that before implementing whatever is happening around it. And so that's kind of the thought behind the phasing of this.
Okay. So
And part
people
of
are
it's,
asking.
part of it's
about-
also workflow of, we got the housing element due at the end of this year and a few other policy items. What's the appropriate time given staff and the commission's workload, which is, I know, our next item, and we can talk about that. It all budget and workflow all fits together in my mind.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Everett?
Yeah, a couple of questions. So what's the connection with the Americorps? Do they fund, sponsor? Why is that name and for that project?
Excellent question, and I will just do a quick zoom in. This project is likely to be renamed. The reason it is called Americorps is the very top part of it, right by the fields, was originally constructed. So that sort of dashed line here, that was originally constructed using Americorps people. And so that's what's called the Americorps Trail. The extension itself, these black lines here, here, the new bridge, the new pergolas, extension, all that's all. And even between here and here, it's really just a foot beaten path. It's not a formal trail. So all of that work is essentially new. And City Council has actually already asked that question. They've already asked if they can rename it. And Ag and Open Space doesn't care. So yes, we can rename it. It just, if there's a better way to call it until it is renamed, I think Kenyon, when he submitted the grant for this, simply called it the Americorps Trail Extension.
Yeah, that makes sense. At least refer to it until get a new name on there. And
if someone wants to have a generous donation,
there you go.
I'm sure the city might consider a naming opportunity.
There you go. Also regarding grants, and just kind of along lines of Kathy's question, I know that what I understand is oftentimes a grant for a creek would include like the path for it as well. So just wondering if the grant specifically will be within Ives Park, or is there spillover into this, say down by Jewel Avenue, that creek area there, or by the railroad forest possibility? How do those grants work?
Sure. I think in terms of what's phasing, so down by Jewel, there isn't a lot of public land for that. I don't know if there are public improvements in terms of the creek where it's channelized or where it's not channelized. I do believe that the area that is east of east of Petaluma Avenue and south of Abbott Avenue, south of the post office annex, towards Railroad Forest, that is certainly a potential for it, particularly for this green stormwater control. So that's a major stormwater path for Calder Creek, whether it's in a conduit under city streets or daylighted over in that portion of town. And so I know GHD is certainly looking at the both, and there are also FEMA grants, hazard mitigation grants. If you recall the hazard mitigation plan we put together, it does include Calder Creek, specifically called out as a flooding prevention and stormwater need in that. So there's a lot of different grants that might be available that, yes, they do, but they mostly have to do with either in the park or the downstream towards the railroad forest.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Blake Lynn Diedler had talked to some property owners about possibly a path from Jewel area, but that's a separate issue, I guess, from that standpoint. And then how is it decided what grants you apply for? Who you guys are pretty busy. Who writes these grants, and how is it decided?
Well, so far I've been the person identifying and writing those grants for the city. And also doing the administering and all the paperwork and invoicing, everything like that for it. In my So that, yeah, that is very definitely limiting. I think, working with Jessica and Riley has been wonderful, and I would hope that they will continue to be engaged in some way. They certainly know the sources and the people involved with a lot of the grant funding. I do have a small portion of my budget available for grant writing assistance. And I've used that from time to time to hire people to help with some of them. I haven't used them for park grants so far, but I could certainly see in this case, it is more complex. For the green stormwater, of course, engineering likely has capability of being able to go after money, and they kind of know what areas within their engineering realm are out there. Additionally, I don't know where this is going to go at all, the Climate Action Committee has requested $60,000 for a grant writer for climate related projects, green infrastructure, reduction in flooding, energy, any sort of thing related to that. Right now that's in my budget. I don't know if it'll stay there. I don't know if it'll get granted. They did raise it at the council meeting last Tuesday when they did their quarterly report out to council. But we haven't had any of the budget subcommittee hearings yet, and they would do any recommendations to council. Council has the final decision on that.
And then also, I know that most grants are for development, creation, so forth, and there's always a challenge for the maintenance part of it, and that's one thing that concerns me because it's it's a complicated ecosystem, and it can't just not just a matter of cutting the grass or doing that type of stuff. So I don't know what's out there, but I think just to keep in mind that that's always an issue, but I'm sure the planning department will take care of all the maintenance of it, right? I'm sure that's what the thought is. So
the public works department, yeah, that's yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, you're absolutely right, Everett. There, everyone wants to fund the sexy stuff, the new pretty things. I think that's actually one of the really nice things about the Measure M park measure is that it can be used for maintenance. Resurfacing a tennis court. Not necessarily terribly sexy, although if you're a tennis player and you've been, it's like a 20-year-old court surface. Yeah, that is part of maintaining and continuing to have parks that are usable. Right now we are using some of that sort of gap funding, but the portions of it, like in the Ives Park pathway, where it's going to be, we're just going to maintain it because we know we're likely to, in the long run, dig it up. That's where we can use those Measure M funding sources to be able to use that for that, those types of things. For the creek itself, one of the things that's happened with the creek is that over time it hasn't been maintained. So the weir has been undermined, and so it can't be used anymore because it just undermines and erodes the soil underneath it. The fact that it's a manufactured saccrete walls around it, in essence, it doesn't repair itself the same way a natural ecosystem would, which is what we're working on. And then lastly, I do have a good relationship with the Laguna Foundation folks, and they have a lot of volunteers as well, are really good at that natural ecosystem maintenance and revegetation like they're doing down for the Americorps Trail. So there are some sources, and definitely, if it's pulling weeds and things like that and maintaining a creek once it's done, I could certainly see that as I think the Planning Commission has mentioned wanting to do some work days at Ives Park. So harnessing some of that energy in our community as well.
Okay, and thank you for representing our viewpoints regarding the shower at the pool and protecting the park funds. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, and I would love to, after questions, get any input or thoughts you have about what I'm presenting tonight in terms of any priorities or thumbs up, thumbs down, things like that.
Deborah or Linda, do you have any questions or comments? Gary?
Thank you for asking, Chair Fritz. I think I'm good for now.
Good. Linda, do you have anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Sure.
Quick question. As you mentioned about priorities, as it sits right now, what are the priorities, or how do you determine what's going to be the priorities?
Sure. So to me, and here's the project title list. For me, the big priorities are the things that we already have going on and getting them done. And they've been on our list for a while. So the Americorps Trail, that's basically handed over to engineering to get it ready for bid. I think they have a little bit of work to do with the consulting engineering firm to get those documents ready and out. The ice park pathway, and that's again because of the safety concerns and trip hazards, but also, yeah, that pathway is just in really bad shape, as we all know. Making sure the master plan keeps moving forward, and then the Burbank Farm public restroom. If we get that grant, then it's basically going to be funded with a pretty small match from the city. So those are all leveraging outside funding measures. And in most cases in the Burbank Farm, we already have the money from those grants. We just need to do the implementation. And so, that's why our recommendation, my recommendation this year is really to make sure, if we have a little bit more Measure M funds or a little bit more funds going into the public, the park improvements funds, because I don't tend to count eggs before they hatch in terms of, oh, this huge, the hotel is going to come in. Well, they have a fee deferral agreement. So they're not actually going to be paying those park fees until the hotel is open. So that's a few years down the road, even if they start construction this year. So really using the money we have and the additional Measure M funds to make sure we can accomplish the things we have grants. Showing that you can get projects done when you go for future grants is super critical. And so I want to take some of these off and get them open and do the ribbon cutting ceremony, just like we did at the Libby Playground.
Do you know when you expect to hear about the CDBG grant?
I believe it will be, let's see, I think formally the funding recommendations do go back to the Community Development Commission meeting that I have next month. And then from there it goes to the supervisors. So it probably goes to the supervisors in about June. And then it's sort of that fiscal year budget, I think, and it'll end up being. So I know they have some design and engineering and bid doc work to do on that. And so I think they are already moving forward with that portion of it, so that when they do get the capital dollars, they'll be ready to go.
Do you have something else, Kathy?
No, I was just wondering when the Burbank restroom ADA work was going to be done, and so do you know, Carrie, is that a separate building, or is it an addition to the cottage?
It will be a separate standalone building. The cottage is somewhat historic, is my understanding, but also just to make sure that it's ADA and it has obviously sewer and water. And it needs to have an ADA pathway between the ADA parking space, the trails, the building, and the restroom itself. So,
yeah, no stairs.
Right, and that general location and work has been done by volunteers, but for it to be and they were actually considering trying to build it themselves. It turns out it was too big of a project, which is totally understandable. But in terms of, okay, now it needs to go out to public bid, it needs to have the appropriate documentation, construction drawings for that to move forward.
And I was just gonna comment on the parklet item. I mean, I appreciate putting some money into that. I think if that's one parklet, I think we could certainly do one parklet for less than 70,000. I'm hoping, I know it remains to be seen. But I think it's good to have something in there because we may be able to do two or, start work on a third or whatever. So I appreciate you kind of putting some money into that for now. It's kind of a placeholder, I think. And I'm hoping, those parklets are not just fully funded by the city. I hope that, and I know some of the businesses are interested in, participating. So I think there's other opportunities and not just city resources to be spent on those. So.
One question. So the bikes, pedestrian and safety projects, are all those considered priority, or are there some that are going to wait, or what's the status of those?
So you're talking about new bike lanes and
Yeah, so like for example,
like
the curb ramps, the flashing lights for Regal West and for the Feller's Lane, and that kind of stuff. Is that I didn't see any, like, when those would be. Is that like in future or coming up this year? Or next
Sure.
year?
So there are some of those as part of this next year's budget proposal. I don't have the full CIP in front of me right now. I apologize. And I've only seen the draft that is going to the budget subcommittee. But I do believe we had council authorization for some funding for Regal Road bike lane improvements. That was approved on consent last Tuesday by council. So we'll be submitting that grant. That's an active transportation plan grant, ATP grant. So I know that's one of the priorities we're moving forward with. The commission will see all of those projects when we come back with the CIP in late May, June, when you're doing your general plan review of it. So you'll get the kind of the full picture of sewer, stormwater, roads, pedestrian, bicycle improvements, public art, all that kind of stuff. And as well, I'm happy to send the draft CIP when it comes out for the budget subcommittee to this group, so you can kind of see it in advance, and if you want to join the budget subcommittee or comment on it to them.
All right, no one has anything else, and doesn't seem to be any members of the public hanging on. I think we can go to the next item, which is the Planning Commission work plan.
All right. Okay, so this item is, it is what it says it is. It's a work plan. So I started this a couple of years ago or a few years ago when I came on board. And part of it is so that you all can have a better understanding, but also help prioritize within the context of the general plan. Our general plan was adopted in 2016. The first major effort for that to get done was the zoning update that was adopted in fall of 2018. That coincided with my coming on board. And so I kind of looked to, well, there's a few things to provide input for what do we do next, and be really specific, be really intentful on what it is we're going to be moving forward with, and not just, oh, this sounds like a good idea. This sounds like a good idea. You have to have an organization, especially for some of these longer projects like the Ice Park Master Plan. So I put together a work plan that was discussed with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended we recommended the final with changes and recommended the final to council. It was reviewed with council, and they also signed off on it. So they knew what Planning Commission was. And I think they might have changed a couple of priorities around based on their own goals. What I've included today is, and I think the last time we updated this was right before COVID. So things have changed a bit, and I will go through really quickly the things that we've accomplished that are coming off the list, just because it's nice for you guys to know, hey, you guys have been head apart in all of this, and this is what you guys have managed to accomplish. Most of you have been on. Zach, Linda, Paul, Kathy Everett as part of all of this, and Debbie, this is maybe a little bit of an introduction on what we've been working on the last few years. And then I will go through the proposed work plan with updates. So we can talk about the new things, and I'd like to get your input on priorities, any missing items, anything that you think should be either promoted or demoted on that. So I'm going to start on, I believe it's page 2 of the report, which is the first page of the work plan. Since we adopted this, we have adopted a telecom ordinance update that is now in your code. Like all codes, it will need to be refreshed at some point, and it can certainly be simplified. But so far, it's been working well. We have been doing mostly the smaller antenna requests where it's a replacement of existing equipment on the towers. We have not gotten any applications for infrastructure in the public right of way, which was part of why this update was done when it was done. The small cell towers, we didn't have any requirements in our code until this update was done. Local hazard mitigation plan, and just this will be sort of a planning director report as well, I guess. It has, we just learned a week or so ago that it was approved by Cal OES, California Office of Emergency Services. They have forwarded on to FEMA for review. I think they did that last week. And it sounds like FEMA usually has a 45-day review period. So we will be wrapping that up and getting that to council for adoption this fiscal year. And so I've kind of crossed it all off, but I did sort of put in we anticipate it'll be done this year. And of course, this commission had the heavy lifting, both having Zach as our representative from the commission on that body, as well as you all serving as the advisory board for that. We've completed the development impact fee study and user fee study that was on the work plan that was adopted last May. We do have vacation rental. This is actually one of those items that came up over time when we realized that the non-hosted portion of our vacation rental ordinance wasn't quite working. And I think I've heard from others that there's some other tweaks that might need to be made for rentals as well. John and I actually have a kickoff meeting with the consultant tomorrow morning to kick this project off. It is one of those that got delayed a bit due to other workflows and COVID, but we have definitely had our eye on this, and this is actually one of the projects being funded through the SB2, some of the housing planning grants that we're getting. Design review guidelines for commercial development. This is one that's changed a little bit with the passage of some of the state legislation, and we have the design review subcommittee, and Chair Fritz is on that, as well as Mayor Slater and 2 DRB members. We started working with the standard conditions. We have an RFP out for a consultant to help us with the objective standards. And actually the standard conditions of approval are going to City Council for approval on April 5th. They've already gone through both the Planning Commission and the Design Review Board for both of those bodies' review. I would anticipate that wherever the objective design standards for multifamily mixed use end up, they will lead into updates to the commercial design guidelines. So that is one where I'm kind of recommending that the title might change a little bit in terms of the order that we're doing things. Parks and recreation planning, we had a number of sort of low-hanging fruit at our parks. I'm calling that done, but I do know our Ives Park Subcommittee has suggested that we do that for other parks as well, to see some of that short-term low-hanging fruit and what we can get done there. I'm not sure if it belongs on this work plan or not, but I think it's fine to have a placeholder for that. Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So this is separate from the Ives Park Master Plan. Our general plan actually calls out the need for a full citywide Parks and Recreation Master Plan. this is actually something that I've worked on when I was a private consultant doing master planning. But given the workload right now, we kind of know in general we need some parkland on the south side of town, and are looking at those opportunities as they come up. This is something that would need to be a larger effort led by a consultant, just because of the time it takes to do such a project. And one of the questions I have for the commission is, is this, or is the Ives Park master plan update, what do you feel about that in terms of what to do when? Standard conditions, as I noted, those sort of got folded into the design standards. And then we always have the sort of catch-all of zoning ordinance cleanup items. And then I think the rest of these were seen as, if you see on the left side of the page, there's B's and C's. That's because in our general plan, it does organize it in terms of priority. And so the A priorities are what we just kind of went through more closely, as well as the zoning ordinance stuff that was done in 2018. These are part of our general plan implementation. That would be Planning Commission responsibility, or Planning Commission DRB, but they are a little bit further down the road. And I'm just, because they show up in the next one, I'm just going to skip to the proposed update. And so this is, if you're following along, this is page 12 of the PDF. In this version, so this is what we're proposing now. I've dropped out everything that's completed. And so now we're looking at, okay, the next couple of years, what is it that we're going to be doing? The vacation rental ordinance just getting started in March, and the objective design standard process. Those are two that are already budgeted for. The RFPs are already out, or the contracts already signed. The housing element update, obviously that started in September of last year. It is required to be adopted by the end of January 2023. So that will continue to be a major item, work item for both the planning department, the planning commission, and the city council in the next round. And I realized I missed when it's due to the state, because state legislation just changed it, and they gave the state 30 more days to review it, but they didn't give us any more time to put it together. So I have to change that date, and I missed that. Item 4 is a little bit of a placeholder. It is state legislation requirements. Most years there is some sort of state legislation which is passed that requires the city to respond to it. A couple of years ago, that was an update to our ADU ordinance. In order to keep our ADU ordinance valid and not have to go with the state laws, we had to update ours, and we got that done in the matter of a couple of months. Fortunately, we had a lot of things that were already best practices that were adopted by the state that we were already doing. But I do anticipate, that type of thing continues. This last year, SB 9 was passed. We don't have any ordinance that talks about, that's the urban lot split of single family parcels. We don't have an ordinance to guide that development. I've actually folded that into the RFP to have whoever is helping us with their objective design standards also help us do that. They tend to be the same consultants, and that would still be working with the design review subcommittee on that one. Electronic permitting implementation. We are in the middle of this one. John Jay is the associate planner, is leading this project to implement not only online permitting, but a parcel database system that tracks all of our planning records by parcel. That won't have a whole lot of input from the Planning Commission, although hopefully you enjoy it once it is online. And I do know from my experience that will make our lives easier all the way around when it's there. Item 6, it's underlined because I've added it, given how things have developed. The Ives Park master plan update or implementation. So we've got a few items that are done, the sculpture garden, the naturalization concept underway. And then Kathy, these are the two, I'll just, these are the two pieces, the funding identification and procurement for the creek, but also for the rest of the plan, and then the update to the master plan itself, pending both funding and or staff workload. I've actually placed this one above the citywide park and rec master plan. But as I mentioned, that is something that I'm interested in getting the commission's input on in terms of how you feel it should be prioritized. And then, so those are the major sort of 6, 7, 8 items to be working on. Additional things include the zoning ordinance cleanup. And some of those include some early implementation items that I anticipate coming out of the housing element update we're doing, as well as some of the things we've talked about before, the clarification of auto uses and maybe a little bit more guidance on how those should be handled in downtown, revising regulations, which there's a little bit of a loophole in our code right now where you could convert an entire department building in downtown to hotel without any sort of use permit, because both hotels and residents are defined as residential, and you don't require a use permit in downtown for a hotel. So there's a few things that are some of them we are a little exposed in terms of someone coming in and trying to push forward something we don't want, and other things are just clarifying and codifying some of the clarifications the commission and council has done otherwise. And so those items have kind of been added in. I haven't moved any of the others from that secondary B and C list up. And I won't go through it in detail. I know you guys read your staff reports, and we'll speak if there's something that is really burning that you feel we should be moving. So I'm going to stop there, open up for any questions or suggestions.
Thank you. Who would like to start? Anyone? Kathy?
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm grateful that you put the Ice Park Creek and planning ahead of the general planning for parks, but I had told Everett earlier that I wasn't as interested in going through the other parks and trying to work on them too, but I feel like I am more interested in that now. It will help me, I think, to have a better vision of how all the parks are used, and I would like to spend a little more time in those parks just on my own. So I still think that that is important too, and I'm glad that that's on the list.
Everett?
Yeah, I would concur as far as priority for me is the Ives Park master plan, and there's a need to kind of get an idea of what else is going on, but not if it slows down that portion. I think that's something would be great to move forward on that. A couple questions. What is the rights of nature ordinance? What can we example of what that's listed on there?
Sure, and I'm just going to go to that real quick and zoom in so everyone in the public or wherever can follow around. I did that and then I lost it. So hold on. There we go. Okay. All right, thank you for your patience. So the rights of nature ordinance. So this is a action under the the open space element of our master plan, and it's really the idea that nature itself has rights. When you're doing development or you're doing other things, a lot of time the externalities of what you're doing to the environment aren't considered. We do have in the Laguna areas, the environmental and scenic open space overlay that requires us and the commission to provide guidance and for us to look at the implications to habitat, to flora and fauna, and the impacts that that we have on that. And so this is, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but this is really looking at the implications of the things that we do approve as a city. Can we be more proactive with our environmental measures as just in terms of not just, I would sort of describe it in, CEQA in California, the California Environmental Quality Act looks at where the current state of things environmentally, and it asks you to analyze if you're going to have any significant negative environmental impacts. What it doesn't do is it doesn't look at where the environment should be or could be. It just looks at where the current state. So if you have a completely degraded site, CEQA is going to say that's great, but the reality is, can we make things better? Can we actually bring things back to where they were naturally? And the Calder Creek is naturalization is a perfect example of that in a lot of ways. It's, environmentally, you could do CEQA on it, and well, it's already channelized and it's already this and that. So, CEQA on that project is going to be pretty easy. Because you couldn't do much to get worse on that, on what's been done to that creek in that area. But the rights of nature, well, what is the right of that creek to actually have a natural pathway? And I'm sure others would define it differently, but that's my understanding of what that is.
That helps. We also talked about updating the, I don't know if it's ordinances or recommendations, whatever, regarding maintaining creeks going through private property. I'm not sure how you would define that.
Yeah. So we would call that and thank you, Everett, because that is not on this list. So the city has a creek ordinance, and it's in the section of our code, basically called general regulations that affect multiple districts. So if you have a creek, it obviously could go through commercial, industrial, residential zones. So we have our regulations in there for the creek. And yeah, you're right. That is something that is very dated, as I mentioned previously. It is basically there in a way to make sure that you don't get localized flooding of structures right up. So it doesn't allow you to build within 30 feet of the creek, but it doesn't say anything about what you should be doing in that 30 feet. So that's actually a good, I'm sorry, I don't want to put words in the mouth. Are you suggesting we add that to the work plan? Is that your next step?
Yes. So I think that's important. And I don't know if this is the place for it, I guess, but I'll just keep harping on the maintenance issues of, it just seems that any project, when they're looking at CEQA, they're looking at impact, they're looking at all this stuff, maintenance should be part of that, at least to look at, to decide, to determine this is what it's going to take to maintain it, or this is the resources. And then, you can still go through with the project or not, but I think it's those types of things need to be identified, because oftentimes they're just, they go through that and there's really nothing required of that. But just from a public perspective, I'd like to know, okay, this that you're passing, what is it going to create down the road for maintenance? So I don't know if this ties in any way to this, but just wanted to put that out. And then I think it's also the food truck ordinance, if you can jump to that one. Let's see. Identify that. trying so I can read the correct. Oh, yeah, here it is. Planning Commission request to review allowing food trucks or other mobile food vendors to satisfy the food service requirements for bars, alcohol establishments. I think that is in my opinion, a priority because that falls under kind of health and safety. Establishments, all establishments that have alcohol license are required to provide food. It's nothing that's been looked at or enforced or so forth. But I think it's important, and I can understand. I mean, it logistically or financially, it doesn't make sense for a business to have a full-on kitchen or whatever. But it may encourage, if it's looked at and enforced a little bit, it may encourage these bars, alcohol establishments to maybe pull together to satisfy that need by having a food truck available and so forth. And I think it's there for a reason to have food to absorb alcohol for safety and health. So I kind of look at that as an important point. And that's all I had. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry, thank you. I was saying, when I think about this more, and I've been through a couple of permits with the Planning Commission in the Barlow, and I'm thinking of the region wine tasting, and I think Crooked Goat does it as well. They do, you guys are already allowing people to satisfy the food requirement for bars with coordinating with offsite. The city also does allow food trucks, and we actually in late 2018, that big zoning ordinance update, we adopted guidance for that. So I don't know if I don't think there's a code change needed for that. I think it would be allowed right now if there was a bar that had say Crooked Goat wanted to invite a food truck, or Riley wanted to open a cafe and they wanted to use the food truck that's already there Monday through Friday to satisfy their for their alcohol permit. It would simply be a matter of the commission reviewing, having a condition that it be present whenever they're serving alcohol, and I think you'd be able to approve it right now.
Yeah,
in my mind.
Yeah, and I think by bringing attention to it, because I think by itself, a food truck operator doesn't make financial sense to come to Sebastopol in a lot of situations and slowly build up business and pay licenses and all this stuff. But if it's subsidized because it's advantageous to some of the other businesses, well, then maybe it does, and it allows a food truck to come in and do that. So I think that's kind of what I look at as the importance of it. Yeah, and I love the Crooked Goat. You can go there, your menu, you can order from different areas. It's a great solution. It works really well. I've ordered from there, and it's quick service, and it works out good. So, but I think it's just something that we want to bring the attention. We don't want to, have these places closed because they're not doing that. But I think by bringing the attention, it then may create these businesses to contribute or to find a way to support, food trucks or those types of things, especially late at night when there's really no other options and, people are drinking and it's just not.
Sure. So Commissioner, let me ask a question. Since it's already feasible and it doesn't take a code change for them to be able to do that. It just takes them proposing it. Mm-hmm. What do you feel is the best way to either get the word out or help people understand that?
Yeah, I think just, some kind of a positive reach out, just, hey, by the way, this is you're supposed to be providing food. Here are some options for you to do that, and maybe they already are, they contribute, and the other thing is, which I don't know if we talked about, again, also having to do with food trucks, is we had talked about creating a permanent location with the hookup, and that food truck could just roll in there. I know some other cities have that, and I think it's at least worth taking a look at and putting it on, may not be realistic or get to that point, but I think it's worth adding it to the list. Whenever we have the opportunity or a grant or whatever, like an ideal place would be right where the library, is it library or library? I can't know how to pronounce it. But with the old, round table used to be that lot right across there, kind of in a corner that faces, you could put a truck there. Yeah, you'd lose 1 or 2 spaces there possibly, but to be able to have a truck roll in, hook up power and all the other things that are needed. Austin has a great food truck park basically that happens year round. So anyways, it's
Portland, yeah.
Yeah, if the other commissioners are okay with that, I'd like to see it on the list somewhere. That's all I have.
Linda, do you have any comments?
I see, excuse me, the issue around community impact reports, it's been on the list for a very long time. I don't foresee a big project coming through, but I, hate for the spirit of why that got put there. And of course we can't do everything all the time, but I'm glad to see that it's on the list. And the rest of it, boy, there's a lot of stuff here that we've done and are doing. And I just want to give a shout out to our planning director for, first of all, you got a shout out for your love of nature and that you knew what the, let me pull up can't find it right now, but the primacy of nature in doing economic redevelopment and also economic revitalization. And I remember when we did the last general plan update, it got brought up and we had a very long discussion. So I'm glad it's still there. Just wish we could, take care of that as well. So, but I think the priorities are fine. And so I'm interested to see how we work through the vacation rental issue. There's so many facets and so much information out there. It's I'm sure you're going to have lots of opportunities to look at what we have, what people are doing locally and regionally, and even on the statewide level. So I think I read today Los Angeles is suing one of the vacation rental agencies for not holding up their good neighbor issues. And so I thought, okay, the city, that's a big city. So that's about all I need to say right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. And I will note, yes, I am familiar with the community impact report. And while we haven't moved forward with a formal policy, there are actually a lot of great guidelines that my staff and I, when we're reviewing projects, we think about these criteria. What are the impacts on employment and jobs? What are the impacts on housing? What is the impact on the neighborhood? We also look at it through the light of a local hazard plan. What is it? How is it going to interact with the floodplain? And is it appropriate development there? So even though these aren't codified in any way, they certainly are when someone comes forward with the use permit, that sort of catch-all of, is this a good thing for the community? Is this in the best interest of the community? Those are the types of things that we're kind of looking at and trying to identify the concerns we think the commission might have with that as well.
So I meant to say the rights of nature. All of a sudden my mind went blank. But I know Mendocino County sort of did a little version of that as well as the precautionary principle. And that was a long time ago. So those things are great ways of framing. And then just a little bit back to the community impact reports. You know, the big cities that have done those for a large project where you get together, you know, the housing advocates, not always necessarily the local ones have shown up and negotiated, but, you know, it's still to bring the different groups together and try and find, you know, something that'll be livable for everyone. And never is perfect, but I think it's a great model, and our county has taken a leadership in it. So, okay, that's it.
Thanks. I did have a few comments myself. I agree that I think we should, since we're kind of mid Ives Park, kind of updating of that master plan, I think it's good to kind of keep that on the front burner rather, over the kind of whole city master plan. But I would think it would be interesting to do, a planning commission meeting maybe this summer in another park, and maybe we do that once a year where we pick a park and we just walk through and do the low hanging fruit like we did at Ives Park. We don't have to do a full citywide master plan, but I think just kind of keeping us, I go to Ives Park because it's a couple blocks from my house. I see it all the time, but I don't ever go to Super Park. I don't, there's plenty of other parks in town I never go past or see or have any involvement with. So it'd be nice just, to keep us all updated on, the current status of the various parks in the city. I think it'd be nice to just sort of, every August we do a park tour, we kind of just rotate through all the parks once a year or something like that. Regarding the municipal code cleanup, I agree. I think there's a lot of, I just, since I use the zoning code and I look at it now and then, I just see things that I think need cleaning up. And, the one that's been bugging me since the day we reviewed it is the commercial use table and the kind of confusion of auto-oriented uses. There's like two columns and sometimes, one's allowed and one's not allowed, and just kind of a weird, I think that just really needs to be cleaned up before we get another car wash or auto-oriented use downtown. So I have an ongoing list in my mind of things that, actually physically written down, things we need to clean up. So I'd like to sort of, and I don't know if some of those are sort of housing related too. So I don't know if the housing related ones can be wrapped into the housing element update. If there's things that we're needing to address in the zoning code related to the housing element, maybe we can wrap some of these other issues that are related to housing into that same, update at that time or something like that. What else? And these are, we're kind of further down, not on the priority list, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to comment on. One is it's on page 5 of the PDF, and it's the downtown plan update, which, the downtown plan is very old and could certainly use an update. And I think a potential path forward to doing something like that is Caltrans has, it's called the Sustainable Transportation Grant, or Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. And it's an annual grant. It happens I think it's due every fall. They open the new application period, but I've looked through those in previous years, and they definitely have sort of downtown kind of improvement sort of plans. I mean, it has to be somehow related to transportation, but I think especially for our downtown, the impact of the Caltrans right of way, really, in my mind, impacts downtown negatively. I don't think it has to. I think you can have a downtown, a Main Street that's a Caltrans right of way, and there's certainly other cities in the state that have a much better pedestrian oriented downtown than we have. So I think that could be an opportunity for taking a downtown or updating the downtown plan. That's a sort of funding source to do that. And then the other thing that's kind of lower down the list, but I think it's somewhat related to some of the code updates, is looking at in lieu parking fees for downtown development. And I'm just going to point out there's for example, as a property for sale, the building that has sage stone and porticos for sale, just north of Bodega on Main Street. And, sort of traditionally, the way towns developed was very incrementally. You build a one-story building and eventually they add a second story or a third story, and the building gets taller and a little bit more intense. And because of our parking, our zoning code and the parking requirements, I mean, that lot cannot be redeveloped. It has no possibility for having on-site parking. The lot is as big as the building. There's no, like some of the other Main Street lots have access from the back alley where they could do some kind of little parking in the back. But this particular lot, and there's others like it downtown, is just completely landlocked. And so it's always just going to be a one-story commercial use. It has no opportunity to redevelop as, a mixed-use building. And I think that's unfortunate because the building's not great. It's kind of outlived its life, but if someone's going to buy it, it's just going to kind of be to maintain it because they can't really redevelop it anyway. So anyway, I think kind of looking at some kind of in lieu fee or just kind of looking at downtown parking or something like that would help catalyze possibly some downtown redevelopment of buildings that are kind of underutilized or near the end of their productive life. And I think that's all I had. Let's see. The one other thing I just wanted to point out, I was noticing because in the park budget item, Karen, on the last page about the parklets, it didn't have a specific general plan goal associated with it. And as I was looking through the work plan, this is related to the downtown plan update. We have a action item to provide quality publicly accessible open spaces at appropriate locations downtown. So I thought you could use that as the kind of impetus for the parklet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, you're doing my job for you. I appreciate that.
Just made the connection last night as I was reading through both reports. I'm like, hey, I think I could have a general plan policy.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, as you can see, between the parks, and there is between that and a lot of the other improvements going around in town too. Yeah.
So is that helpful? Do you have any other specific questions for us? Does that give you a sense of?
Yeah, that is helpful. I'm getting a sense that everyone's good with what our kind of immediate work is, the first couple of pages, a lot of which is already laid out and already underway. I guess one question for those that are sort of within the B categories, is there any sort of reorganization you'd like me to do to, demote some of the things that we haven't talked about, like the dark sky regulations, the tree protection ordinance and those types of things, and elevate and the noise standards and elevate others? Or are you okay knowing that when we do getting to this, we'll do a more fine-grained sorting of it?
Yeah, I mean, I personally would like to move the downtown plan and the in lieu parking up higher in that list, but those are my personal pet peeve items. I mean, I think, I feel like when we did the zoning code update, we took a pretty hard look at the noise ordinance. I don't know that needs to be updated. I don't know if any other commissioners want to weigh in on that, but I felt like we were fairly thorough on that when that happened. Yeah, the tree protection ordinance, doesn't really cross our path too often, so I'm not really familiar with where that is or what needs to happen with it. Same thing with the dark
Yeah, I
sky
think that would be-
regulations. Those are kind of design review items. So I'm not particularly familiar with how important it is to how to categorize those in terms of the priority list. I mean, I know we have those regulations somewhat in place. I'm just not sure how, robust they are, what would need to happen to get them.
Sure, and I would say that our tree protection ordinance is stronger because it does have heritage tree listed. We haven't, we do have some listed as nuisance trees like eucalyptus and acacias, which is great because they're completely pyrophytic and escaped exotics. Frankly, when I was working in the valley, some people really, really love their eucalyptus trees and they live right in the heart of the wildlands. And you're like, oh, it was really tough. We've already, that row has already been hoed here, which is great. There are certainly some updates that could be done with that, but I think it's in general pretty good shape. And you're right, it would be a design review / tree board lead on that one. It would come to the planning commission just because anything that goes before council in this realm does. The dark sky regulations they're probably easier to address in some ways. And right now we have a design standard that says, protect against light bleed to adjacent properties, and I use that, and John uses that to make people do the cutoff so that you're not also illuminating the sky. Unfortunately, that's only projects that are subject to design review. It doesn't encompass, retrofits or any sort of single family that doesn't go through design review, which is a lot of our town. And so a lot of that is, you get your neighbor's garage light shining right into your bedroom and up into the sky by the lagoon and all that kind of stuff. So that if it was my way, I'd want that one elevated, but I'm not, you guys are the commission, not me.
I've heard.
One thing I didn't see on here, I think the city recently had kind of like a workshop was it for people that wanted to convert some space or for guidance? I can't remember. I remember seeing it on one of the projects, but anyway, having to do with identifying and helping residents to create more living space. Maybe somebody has an attic and they don't know anything about it, right? The average person wouldn't know that, hey, did you know you could do this and create this much more space and then, kind of help the city identify some of those low-hanging fruits or what is possible, or you go to a workshop and you have an architect there and you have a finance person, here's a couple of structure plans, ABC plans that you can convert a garage into, rooms or living spaces, something like that.
Right, we have done that's sort of an ongoing initiative. We did, I think, in 2018, in the fall of 2018, right around the time our new zoning ordinance was going into effect, we had a housing fair. Paul, I think, was part of that as one of the architect kind of experts, lending, sort of talking to folks. We had that at the community center, and it was a pretty packed house. It included people from Permit Sonoma, Margaret Van Vliet from the Community Development Corporation. We had people from Redwood Credit Union, which I think at the time was the only people doing financing for people to build ADUs. So we did that. We still have a lot of that material on our website. We've also been working with the Napa Sonoma ADU Collaborative. And we have Alan and Steve and Patty from Building, and Alan, who used to be our associate planner, did a webinar through that about how to build an ADU in Sebastopol. John is working with them right now in terms of they have a calculator up so that you can get kind of, in Sebastopol, what would that mean? A unit of this size, this type would cost about how much to build, what would your fees be, building permit fees, and what would the likely rent be, so that people can kind of understand the financial portions of that as well. So we do have a pretty big presence on our website about that, and we do offer those types of webinars and such over time. So, and I know when we had the housing workshop with the city council a couple weeks ago, that promoting ADUs, it was actually one of the things that we talked about specifically in terms of continuing that relationship with the collaborative and continuing to find ways to promote ADUs and JADUs. Those are the, you know, the conversions oftentimes. And yeah, in Sebastopol, most of them are rented out or used for, you know, a family member who would otherwise be trying to find a place somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think that for people that have that already thought in mind, hey, I've got some extra land, I think I want to do this, or they're kind of thinking about that, that's helpful. But I'm also, for people maybe never would have thought of that. Oh, really? I could do that here, and this space could be converted to this or that. You know, there's probably quite a few of those around that simply, you know, hey, you want somebody to come and look at your property, what's possible type deal. And, you know, again, easier projects that we could add, you know, more living spaces for people, you know, rather than have to build something from scratch or, you know, that kind of stuff. So I don't know how you would handle that, but I think that may be something.
Yeah, I think the Napa Sonoma Collaborative does do that. I think they charge a small fee for it because obviously you've got to pay someone to go out and do it. But I think they're already set up to do that kind of a thing. And so it may be just promoting that and making that more apparent
just to kind of
to residents.
Put that notion out there that, hey, you know, you might have some space that you never thought about or could convert.
Right. And that is definitely inherent in that housing element update.
Yeah.
Item, so.
Okay. Thank you.
We seem to be losing commissioners one by one.
Yeah, no, well, Debbie said she was obviously on spotty cell. I think she came out and in and out a few times trying to stay with us. But so my recommendation on this would be that we'll go back and make a couple of final adjustments and bring it back to the commission kind of as a consent item, just so those who weren't here or who had to drop out can kind of look at the final list and then bring it forward to council to get their blessing on it as well, just like we did last time.
And you do have on there the recommendation of an annual meeting. I don't know why that kind of has pushback, but I think it, you know, I've been to one years ago and I thought it was fantastic. Got to know each other, kind of got an idea from council what direction we're kind of, you know, going, and just kind of, I think it just helps overall. But I see it on the list, so just want to reiterate. I think that's a good.
Maybe when the
council. Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying maybe when the council reviews our work plan, we can be there to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
You know, we can have a joint session. We talk about the work plan
and they say no, it's a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And of course, we did have a joint work session for the housing element kickoff last September, which was really nice.
That was helpful. All right. So moving on, does anyone have a subcommittee update they'd like to report on? All right. And Carrie, did you have anything you'd like to bring us up to date on?
I have a few things just to let you know of happenings. So just past recent actions by the council. The March 1st meeting, I believe I reported on that, but they did approve the Huntley Square Townhome subdivision. That went to its the second reading for the rezoning portion of it, the plan committee zoning, on the 15th. So that is done with council. They have a final review by the design review board / tree board, and then left, and John is working with them on that. The 7th, we had a great housing workshop, and I want to thank Paul again for spending both the 1st and the 7th with us and the council as the planning commission's liaison to that. I really appreciate your perspective and what you're able to add to the conversation. Let's see, on upcoming items, April 5th, the next city council meeting, there's a few items on the gas station ban. Ordinance will be on for the public hearing and first reading. So that's typically the larger one. The Planning Commission geography change and potential change to the size discussion, or how they want to handle that. And then we will, as I mentioned, have the standard conditions of approval on that agenda as well. A couple of things in the art world. If you haven't already, please go by the library on Bodega Avenue. You will see the Michael McGinnis commission sculpture is fully installed. He's got a little work to do on the inside of the library where he did all the connections behind that wall, but the art itself is installed. I will definitely let you know when I meet with the Public Art Committee. I'm sure we'll have a dedication ceremony, and I'll let you all know when that is. The Public Art Committee does also have a call out for additional sculptures at the Ives Park Sculpture Garden. They're looking at having their ceremony for that on for the sort of the opening and dedication of that for both the existing sculptures and any new sculptures on June 18th. I believe that'll be kind of in the morning. I believe that's a Saturday. So if you do know people who might be interested in sculpture, let me know and we can get the call to them. The Climate Action Committee is hosting a compost day in April. I believe it coincides with Earth Day as one of their sponsored events. So if you do need compost for your garden, check that out. It's on the city website. I think I already mentioned the upcoming budget subcommittee meetings. Spring's a busy time of year. What can we say? And I will have just a heads up, moving forward, there will be both some additional outreach for the climate action framework, which I did realize I forgot to add to the work plan. So I will include that in just because the Planning Commission does have a role of reviewing that, but I'll include that for the final draft as a current project with the CAC and Planning Commission and City Council. And then we are getting ready to release a second housing survey. I will again send that to you and all my other various committees and ask that you send that to folks you know so we can get some broad outreach on that. And I think that is it for my items tonight.
Any questions? I'll just make a comment that I went to try to get compost at that last compost event. And the line was absurdly long. So if you want compost, go early. Or maybe late, I don't know. But
they talked about what to do with any leftover, and they did not have any leftover this time.
I wasn't that late. I think I went like around 10:30 and I drove down Laguna Parkway and went to turn on Morris, and the line was like back to McKinley Park, or the Laguna Parkway, so I just said, forget it. I don't need compost that bad. I need to sit in line for 2 hours waiting for compost.
All right. Well, now you know to get early.
I know to go early. I'm telling all you, go early if you want compost. It's popular.
Yes, it is.
All right. And we think we're having a meeting on April 12th?
We will, and I'll probably have the work plan revised for that. And then we'll probably have one of the training sessions as well.
Great. All right, then I will adjourn this meeting until planning commission meeting for tonight, and I'll see you all April 12th.